January 1955 began deceptively calm, but by mid-month, nature seemed determined to test Britain's resolve. The Siberian Express hit the country, an icy front that brought not just cold, but blizzards of an intensity that even the oldest residents couldn't recall. Within days, Scotland, Northern England, and Wales were buried under a layer of snow that grew at a rate of an inch per hour. These weren't ordinary drifts. Hurricane-force winds packed the snow into giant, solid walls as high as a double-decker bus. Literally overnight, hundreds of villages in the Scottish Highlands found themselves in total isolation. Telephone lines snapped under the weight of the ice, roads vanished, and the boundaries between fields and highways were erased, turning the landscape into an endless white desert. People woke up in total darkness. Snow blocked first-floor windows so tightly that daylight could not penetrate inside. To get outside, residents had to climb out through second-story windows or hack actual tunnels from their front doors. Britain, a nation with a sophisticated network of roads and communications, suddenly realized that huge parts of it had simply vanished from the map. There was no contact with them at all. The situation became critical when radio stations in remote areas went silent. No one in London knew if the people in the north had food, coal for heating, or medicine. Trains, considered the most reliable form of transport, began getting stuck in snow traps, and powerful steam locomotives looked like helpless toys embedded in an icy shell. The nation held its breath. It became clear ordinary means would not suffice to save those cut off from the world. Thus began the preparations for one of the largest peacetime operations in the history of the Royal Armed Forces. In the 1950s, the railway was the backbone of Britain. Steam locomotives were considered invincible machines, capable of ploughing through any storm. But the winter of 1955 proved otherwise. On the line between Inverness and Perth, and in the rugged moors of Dartmoor, snow turned railway cuttings into perfect traps. The wind filled these deep trenches with snow to the very brim, creating a deceptively level white surface. When a multi-ton train hit such a drift at full speed, it didn't just stop. It fused into the snow like setting concrete. The most dramatic story involved a passenger train stranded in Caithness. The massive locomotive slammed into a drift higher than its funnel. Passengers, including children and the elderly, were trapped in steel carriages that were rapidly losing heat. Coal for the onboard heaters ran out, and the buffet's food lasted only a few hours. People were forced to sleep huddled together and melt snow over candles just to get a bit of water. Outside, the blizzard raged, making escape on foot impossible. Anyone who dared to step 10 meters from the train risked vanishing forever in the white haze. When rescuers finally broke through to the stranded trains, they saw a surreal sight. Only the very tops of the steam funnels poked out from beneath giant snow mounds. Workers had to manually, with shovels, dig out hundreds of meters of track. Photographs from those years captured workers standing on the roofs of carriages that were level with the ground. So deep was the snow. These images traveled around the world, becoming a symbol of how nature can halt progress overnight. Britain's railways had surrendered to the elements, and the nation realized, in the north, the struggle was no longer for comfort, but for survival itself. By February 1955, the situation in Scotland had crossed the line into a humanitarian disaster. Hundreds of farms and villages had been silent for 2 weeks. People were running out of not just food, but paraffin for lamps and coal for fires. But the most terrifying aspect was the massive loss of livestock. Thousands of sheep and cattle were trapped in pens or in the open air with no access to grass. At that moment, the British government ordered the launch of Operation Snowdrop. It was the first time in the country's history that such a large-scale rescue operation using the Royal Air Force was conducted in peacetime. The skies over the northern counties filled with the roar of engines. RAF transport planes and helicopters flew from bases loaded with bales of hay, sacks of flour, crates of tea, and medical supplies. Pilots performed true feats of heroism, working in conditions of poor visibility and gale-force winds. They navigated by the tops of chimneys poking out of the snow. From a bird's-eye view, they dropped bales of hay directly where they saw black dots, freezing sheep. For people trapped in their homes, the sound of an engine in the sky became the sound of hope. Spotting a plane, residents would run onto their roofs and wave bedsheets to mark drop zones. Bristol Sycamore helicopters, a technical novelty at the time, became literal lifesavers. They could land where no tracked vehicle could pass. Pilots evacuated the critically ill and pregnant women and brought doctors to isolated settlements. Newspapers of the day were filled with headlines about flying rescuers. Operation Snowdrop united the nation. People in warm London packed care packages, while pilots risked their lives to deliver them to the icy hell of the north. It was a battle of 1950s technology against the primordial fury of winter, and thanks to the courage of the aviators, thousands of lives were saved. When the elements finally immured the northern counties, people's lives shifted into another dimension. Those who hadn't managed to evacuate found themselves trapped in their own homes. A strange twilight reigned inside. Windows were blocked by dense walls of snow that let no sound through. The silence was absolute, more terrifying than the fiercest howl of the wind. People were forced to light candles and oil lamps in the middle of the day, rationing every gram of fuel. The air indoors became heavy and cold, and frost covered the inner walls of rooms in bizarre patterns. To survive, neighbors began to dig. These snow tunnels became the symbol of the winter of 1955. Men hacked narrow passages through 15-foot drifts, connecting houses on the same street. Through these icy corridors, they passed food, shared the last portions of coal, and exchanged news. Children saw it as an adventure, playing in snow caves, but for adults, it was a grueling struggle for every breath. The greatest danger was that the tunnels could collapse at any moment or be buried by a new layer of snow in minutes. Daily life turned into a series of harsh trials. Water pipes froze, and people had to melt snow on stoves to wash or cook meager meals. In the absence of radio or mail, the only connection remained those airdrops from Chapter 3. People stamped out huge letters like "Help" or "SOS" in the snow, hoping pilots would spot them before the last loaf of bread ran out. It was a time when social status and wealth ceased to matter. In the icy trap, only those who acted together survived, turning their homes into a unified network of underground shelters. In mid-March 1955, nature traded its fury for mercy. But this brought new trials. Temperatures soared, and the colossal masses of snow accumulated over 2 months began to rapidly turn into water. The very snow canyons where people had walked like through tunnels sagged and blackened with soot. But the main problem was volume. The ground, frozen over a meter deep, could not absorb the moisture. Britain, barely recovering from its icy imprisonment, faced the threat of massive flooding. Small rivers turned into raging torrents, washing away the remains of roads and flooding lowland farms. The winter of 1955 left heavy scars behind. The economic damage was colossal. Northern agriculture was practically devastated, with tens of thousands of sheep lost. But it was this winter that forced the government to completely overhaul its emergency response system. The experience of Operation Snowdrop proved that helicopters were not just expensive military toys, but critically important life-saving tools. New protocols for cooperation between civil authorities and the army were established, which would later save thousands during the Big Freeze of 1963. Today, those events look like scenes from a sci-fi movie about the Ice Age. Photos of trains hidden under meters of snow and planes dropping hay over white wastelands have become part of the National Archive. For Britain, 55 became a symbol of resilience. It was the last winter of the old world, when people could find themselves in total isolation without phones or internet, just a couple of miles from major cities. Those who survived this snowy apocalypse forever remembered the muffled silence beneath the snow and that unforgettable roar of an engine in the sky, signaling that the world had not forgotten them.